Many of you out there are carving out new paths for yourself that look very different from your family of origin. While doing so, you're also exploring diverse systems of personal development, philosophy, the mystical, and the magical. Although it's changing, and it is changing, in my life experience and those of my Black clients, I've noticed some hesitancy in exploring outside of mainstream religion, or even revealing that they're curious and interested in different spiritual traditions. Hi, I'm Stacey Forrester, astrologer and mentor, and I'm here with a special guest today, writer and astrologer Thea Anderson. Welcome, Thea.
Hi. So my name is Thea Anderson. I am a writer and astrologer, as you mentioned, and of the topics you mentioned, I'm really excited to be here and just dive in.
Thank you, Thea. And I know you know this. I came across your work last year at an astrology workshop, shout out AFAN, where you did a talk entitled Bitter Herbs and Seven Spirits, Legacy of Divination in Black America. And when I wanted to have this conversation, I knew I wanted to have it with you. So are you ready to dive into the first question?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right. So in terms of the history of magic and spirituality in Black America, can you share a little bit about that history? And how did we get so disconnected from it?
Yeah, it's a big topic, but I think that the topic of magic and spirituality, if we think of Black America, it's something that's woven into our legacy of having how we came to this country, right? So being ripped from our homeland, being separated, being subjugated, enslaved, and torn apart. And if you think of the violence that does in terms of inherited knowledge, right? Inherited knowledge, when you talk about spirituality and your connection to the divine, it is your technology, right? It's how you thrive. And so there is a real sort of taking what we've got, and without getting into the history and making it into a history lesson, I think that the legacy is working with what you've got and being able to, if you don't call it magic, right? It's to make things go your way. So that's the undercurrent that's running underneath, and sort of what we call, and what different scholars call an invisible church, right? So it's the church you don't talk about. It's the church that you don't even call magic, because that's the devil. You might use terms that come from the Bible, but it's the ability to heal, to repair, to protect, and to gain resources through an understanding of nature and how that corresponds on sort of this hierarchical chain of spirit. So that's sort of a very brief summary, but I think your second part was, how did we get away from it?
Yes, right.
And so that's actually that's something that I'm always interested in exploring. But to go back to the first part of what I was saying is, when you're trying to put something together in circumstances of enslavement, then you have to do so secretly. And then also, see, there's fear, right?
Right.
There's a huge fear of being punished. There's a fear of not adhering to the religion that is handed down from your enslaver. And so that fear, I feel like, is like deeply embedded. I mean, I think about the women and men in my family. It's like, that's sort of like, that magic is the devil, right? You get into this binary, and that to be a good Christian, So
Mhm.
Christianity, I mean, that's not the only religion, but if we look at Christianity and sort of the Bible Belt in America, you could say that that binary of good and bad and right and wrong, that there's a a real interest in preserving things and preserving and things in terms of obedience and in terms of following order, rules. And so the fear of stepping outside of that, I mean, that could be your life. So that
Mhm.
fear, even though in 2022 we're not living under those same circumstances, is still inherited. It's still in our.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, we do inherit those fears through the the generational lines, and I could definitely see how magic and spirituality was protective and nourishing to our enslaved ancestors. Um, and as someone who came to things like astrology, tarot cards, and magic with some hesitancy of being judged. Um, it's it's really affirming to hear about this legacy, and I hope more people of color, more Black people, do hear about how has always been a part of us, always,
Mm,
and
mm.
reclaim it. And that brings me to my next question. We've been talking about these two words, spirituality and magic, and maybe conflating them. And I was wondering if you had a sense of like, how do you think about these two things and these two words that might be um, a bit loaded for people, for Black people, and how do you approach um, family members who may not understand that history that we do have and that we've always been connected to.
Thank you for that question, and I'll definitely frame it in terms of my personal experience because this is the body that I'm in, this is the experience that I have, and I think when I step outside that, it does start to get very like wobbly, like what are we
Yeah,
talking about? But
yeah.
to me, spirituality was here when I was born because I have a spirit. Like you know what I mean? Like I, it just is.
Is,
It,
yeah.
it's and I can enter into a conscious relationship to my spirituality as an adult that really has more to do with unlearning a lot of stuff I learned along the way and
Mm,
returning to that natural state of communion with spirit that was there when I was a child. And so it's just a process of unlearning, and it's just
mhm,
a process of like a returning to
yeah.
that as you get older does require for me
Mhm,
an intentionality, enter into a conscious relationship, space, and a ritual framework. So that's how I seek out, that's how I carve out space for my spirituality, is by carving out space and time for ritual. So in
mhm,
my life, that looks like having doing planetary prayers every morning for the day, an hour of that planet. And so, if you're familiar with the concept of the planetary days, let's talk about this because this is kind of funny.
yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's get
Yeah.
into that.
So the days are ruled by one of the seven spirits. So Sunday is the day of the sun. Monday is the day of the moon. Tuesday is the day of of Mars. Today is Wednesday. It's Mercury's day. Tomorrow's Thursday. That's Jupiter's day. Friday belongs to Venus. Saturday belongs to Saturn. And so when when I started about 2 years ago, being like, okay, I'm going to enter into a relationship with the planets, and I'm going to say at dawn, because if you do it at sunrise at dawn, you'll get the planetary day and the first hour, which are not 60 minutes long. It has to do with the time of sunrise and sunset, and then divide it according to a mathematical process. But you can also just get an app, and it'll tell you based on your location what hour is running at that time. But the surest bet is when you see sunrise and today's Wednesday. Okay, this is the sun. I'm sorry, this is Mercury's hour on Mercury's day, and I'll say, Hermes, draw near unto my prayer incline, angel of Jove, and my son divine. And I'll say the whole thing. And so that's entering into relationship with spirit, with the ruling planet or spirit of the day. And I'm talking to Mercury, and I'm saying, hey, like, here are all your epithets, right? Your other names. Here are all the things that you rule over, that you have dominion over. And I'm acknowledging that. And although you're the planet up here, you're down here too. It kind of, for me, saying those words embodies the spirit. So that's why I enter into conscious relationship with spirit. But I have to tell you, even before I started that, when I was working in the city, and I was like, listen, the only day that I don't want to always just care about Fridays. I don't want to only look forward to Friday. Like, there are 6 other days. I don't want to live my life enjoying a seventh of it, because I was working in an office, and sometimes a Monday could feel really difficult. So what I started to do was journal. I created themes in my head for each of the days. I knew nothing. This is like a decade ago. I was not even thinking about the planets. But because I save all my journals, I can see that Mondays for me were about inspiration, right? Not about doing. I knew that Tuesdays, Mars Day, were generally difficult for me. So I think I made it like motivation. There's usually some hiccup. Wednesdays, I made it success, right? That's Mercury's day. I have a personal relationship to Mercury. Thursdays, growth. Hello, that's Jupiter's day.
Right.
Friday was gratitude. That's Venus. And Saturday was about leisure, which for a while I couldn't figure out, but really for me, it's about not doing a lot. About Saturn, in my chart especially, is just like sit still and abstain. And Sundays were about fun. And so I had already tapped into the energies of the planets when I just meditated on how it showed up, how each day showed up in my life. And I couldn't explain it to anybody. And seeing now that the planets were even with me then, it's just an echo of spirit. You know what I mean?
Okay. I do. And, it sounds very personal, your engagement with spirit. And even though there is a system, astrology, that talks about why there are these planetary days and which day correlates to which day, I love the story that you told about how organic it did come to you before you were aware of the actual system. And, that goes to show that I do think we all have something internally that is always connected, like you began with so beautifully. We are spirit. And so there is a connection already built into who we are. And it's just maybe aligning with it, tapping into it. And and later the other the traditions come in, and then we see how those traditions already align with what we already know and believe and connect to.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, so that I loved what you shared because it was just so pertinent. Thank you.
Could I share about just to say a word about magic? To me, magic has an intentional, for me, it starts with, there's a pain point in my life, right? Magic to me has the echoes of a prayer, right? It's like I know that this is not all up to me. And I know that, a lot of the traditions that I follow, if whether we're talking about, talismanic magic, planetary magic, there's this idea that there is no magic by yourself, that the magic comes from calling on spirit. So that to me, magic puts out the call. And it's like, I have this pain point, and I know in order to resolve it, to soothe it, to heal it, to ask for something to help resolve, fix it, I need to ask spirit. And so then the knowledge and the study comes from figuring out who to ask for what and when. And that's where astrology and magic make this beautiful marriage.
Yeah. Wow. These words. It's not all up to me.
Mm-hmm.
My personal, like, as a Black woman, growing up and feeling like everything was up to me, and not having that connection to magic to tap into, because I thought it was only on me, not some magical thing outside of me. So yeah, that definition of magic being the answer to working with that pain point
Mm-hmm.
is
See, that's the legacy that we're talking about. And it sounds like both you and I discovered it as grown folk. And so that's the reclaiming aspect of what I'm interested in, is like, I am a Black woman in the United States, and I can draw on like traditions that came from my family that were organic. Like, I still pray, you know what I mean? Like, I did learn that in the church. But now maybe I say a different prayer, or sometimes I still say the Lord's Prayer. Like, it's different. Knowing that I can step into a place of empowerment because I'm helped, right?
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. And I think I want our conversation to go there, this reclamation that is like, how do we do that? What has worked for you or your clients? Like, how do we start that process of reclaiming what has always been ours?
Listen, it's a journey. And for me, it was choosing to be like, listen, I came across an astrology book when I was 9 years old. And I sat and I looked at it and I didn't know anything, but I think it was like from a garage sale. And I was like really trying to understand. That's how young I was. And it was like, this is amazing. And I saw so much beauty in its complexity. But I did walk away from it, even though never really, right? This is the invisible church that's inside me. I get to my office job in my 20s and I'm always like, checking my horoscopes first thing. And then I get to a point where I'm like, it's not enough for me to read others' words, right?
Yeah.
I want to understand this language for myself. I say Mercury rules my chart, right? So I have a relationship to Mercury, and Mercury's like, it's time for you to dig into this. And so reclaiming it, like, how can we reclaim it? I think it's just to understand with all of this, right? We're talking all of these things that are sort of thrust upon us as true, like, they're not true. And like, we can step outside them and say, if we're talking about whether it's patriarchy, capitalism, heteronormativity, like, none of this stuff is what I mean. Like, we can just say no. We can just unlearn it.
Right.
And I would say follow whatever your interest is. Like, this is what's beautiful about being able to reclaim. You could just be like, I have an interest in working with plants. I know so many amazing herbalists. And that is reclaiming something right there for you, right? That's using your health and your body in a conscious relationship with nature. I'm using air quotes because I don't think nature is outside of us. It's whatever. We're in communion with it, and choosing to understand how the earth and how, like, that there's healing that comes from that, right? So my healing for me is just learning everything I can about astrology, about
Mhm.
magic. I love to read. I love to study. I feel like
Mhm.
I'll never be done. I
Yeah.
always feel like I don't know enough.
No,
I always
never.
and so that was part of my awakening.
Mhm.
And so I would just say, like, for whatever your interest is, doing that is the radical act. That's
Mhm.
reclaiming your magic. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it's not gonna look the same for everyone.
No, definitely not, and I would add to what you just shared also, if you are someone that does require a little bit more structure, that it's okay to start there, but don't let that be the end point. Um, there is a process of reclaiming once you've like learned like the textbook way of learning. There is a process of getting more personal with what you've learned
Mm.
and having your own thoughts and ideas about how certain things are applied. Um, so yes, I think it's important to trust what you are drawn to, but also if you do, find yourself needing that structure, start there, but don't let that be the end. Thea, thank you so much for joining me. And how can folks learn more about your work and how you can support them?
Oh, sure. I'm a writer and astrologer, and so if you go to my website, Thea Nichelle, that's Nichelle with the N like Nancy.com, you can find stuff on my writing and astrology there too. Um, I'm also work for the CHANI app. I'm the director of production there, so that's a beautiful way just to be in relationship with astrology and also like my logistical sort of mercurial hacking nature that I like to problem solve. So that's the beautiful role I get to do there. Um, I so that's my website. You can find me at Thea Astrology on Instagram. I'm pretty much active there. Um, or at least I'll post about like any talks and stuff I have upcoming on there.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I just be around. Any opportunities to be in conversation like this are beautiful, and I really appreciate them. Especially, I mean, this is one of my favorite topics. I feel like it could go for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. There's many layers that we just haven't gone deep on. That this could be a much longer conversation. Again, thank you for joining me, and I will have links in the description of all the ways to connect with you. So thank you, and take care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.